Hello everyone, my name is Alec Tuckman. I'm from Wealth Management Partners, Los Angeles. What we're talking about today is your portfolio retirement planning in the age of the coronavirus. And for those of you who weren't aware, over the last 2.5, 3 weeks, we've had something of a 30% market drop. We're shooting this on March 21st, 2020, where we've seen devastating effects of the coronavirus. As you probably may have guessed, we're now currently shooting this in my home office. And while I wanted to shoot in the conference room at work, after a long conversation with my wife, who felt it was not beneficial, we were creating something of a risk factor for our children and our family. So hence now we're shooting here at home. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Even before we had the coronavirus as an issue, we were looking at something short of a state of emergency for the nation. Why? Well, 64% of Americans who are looking at retirement currently have less than $10,000 in their bank account. Just under half of middle-class Americans will eventually slide into poverty when they enter their retirement years. In this same survey, when they asked the same people if they had enough money for retirement, 50% of people simply didn't care. Finally, the fourth statistic I want to throw your way is that almost 3/4 of people are going to have to work through their retirement years who don't want to have to work. Let's go ahead and transition, and we're going to look at what's happened in the market recently. Here's what we're looking at in terms of the stats. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, which if you didn't know is a collection of 30 different top performing companies in America, down 32%. The S&P 500, a collection of 500 different stocks in corporate America, down just over 28%. Then we have the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ is a compilation of newer companies and tech companies. That was down 23%. Then we have oil, down 67%. And with oil, there are other factors at play, not just the market as a whole and the coronavirus. Understand there are other factors going on like Saudi Arabia flexing their muscles against Russia that also help drive down the price for oil. But by and by, the markets as a whole are down roughly 20 to 30% as we film this. What does that mean in terms of an overall performance with the market? Well, let's look at some benchmarks. If we compare today to 1987 as a benchmark, we actually had a faster decline overall this time around than we did in 1987, also known as Black Monday. If we look at 2008 as another benchmark, the market at that point in time, over roughly a 2-year period, declined. At that point, it declined 55%. Now, currently, we're looking at, again, about 30%, whether you're looking at the Dow or the S&P. If we look at the time frame in which it dropped, with 2008, we had what's called a black swan event. That's something that doesn't happen very often. In that time period, it took from roughly October of 2007 to February of 2009 to make that decline. That was a roughly 55% decline. Here we are in a much faster stance in our decline at almost 35%. Now, when we talk about black swan events, while I'm concerned about what we've seen, and while I definitely think this is going to head us in the direction of a recession, I am more concerned about another possible black swan event. Number one, we have something called an ETF bubble, where, if you didn't know, ETFs are exchange-traded funds, where exchange-traded funds are a compilation of different stocks, usually benchmarked to S&P or some other market, where because so much money was pouring into the ETFs, it could potentially create a bubble. Number two, we have another bubble similar to what we saw in 2008, which is the auto loan market. Now, a lot of subprime loans are being taken out where people are buying cars they can't really afford, where they're using a 7-year time frame. For that reason, we have a significant amount of people that are out of work. That could start a chain reaction, which essentially, even a longer catastrophic event where we're going to have several years where we may not be able to get back on track. That has me more concerned than the virus, the coronavirus itself. So just be prepared, be ready. I'm not saying this to scare people. I just want people to be prepared and anticipate you need to buckle down. This could be a longer ride than we anticipate. The effects of the coronavirus have to have time to play itself out. My thoughts, well, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a fortune teller. I do think we're looking at potentially another 3 to 6 months before the coronavirus can run its course. However, because information is more readily accessible, that does make it easier to prevent the spread of the virus. So we do have that working in our favor. So in terms of looking at an agenda today, we're going to go over several points. We're going to talk about retirement planning. We're going to talk about how the coronavirus is going to affect that planning. We're also going to talk about certain things like stock market factors, how you may want to reallocate, different strategies. We're going to talk about a lot. But first I want to talk about a movie called The Intern. Maybe you've seen it. If you've seen the film, or if you want to go on YouTube and check out the first 2 or 3 minutes, the 2 minutes in the beginning of this movie really represents what retirement should be. It shows Robert De Niro pursuing all his goals. He travels a lot, he learns Tai Chi, he studies Cantonese. It's about embracing all your dreams and fulfilling those dreams. What it turns out to be in some cases, and it may turn out to be for a lot of people based on what's happening with the coronavirus, is something of a minefield, where people are navigating through this minefield trying to avoid explosions because they aren't familiar with some of the potential pitfalls and traps and challenges we've seen with retirement planning. So what I want to do today is identify some of those mines so you avoid those challenges and don't have to deal with some of those red flags. A little about me. And I've been in the business since 1994. My first job in the industry was working at Goldman Sachs in the asset management department. If you didn't know, there are 2 different types of advisors. There's fiduciary financial advisors, which I am, and there are advisors who make suitability recommendations. So if you work with an advisor, whether it's me or somebody else, make sure you're working with a fiduciary. I have my designation as a fiduciary, meaning I literally studied how to be a good fiduciary advisor. I've taken a sworn oath, and I have to put your needs again before my own. Anything I say, I have to justify if I'm audited in front of a judge or an auditor. I have my licenses in securities, real estate, and the insurance industry. Interesting enough, everyone in my life seems to revolve around someone in the financial related industry, meaning my wife is a mortgage banker, my brother is a day trader, my parents were economists, my uncle was an entrepreneur, my grandfather ran a successful foundation. So even if when I wanted to get out of the finance industry, they kept pulling me back in, kind of like The Godfather. But what's helped me is the fact that since I've been in diapers, I've learned about money, how money makes money. And while I realize not everyone has had the opportunity to be privy to those kind of conversations, I love passing on that information and educating people, and hence here we are today shooting this video for your benefit. The clients I have are more educated investors. By default, we always explain our strategies, our philosophies, because we want them educated. We want them to know what's going on and why. So we think that's extremely important when we work with our clients to lead them down the path of success. So a little bit about the company itself. Wealth Management Partners has recently partnered with a company called SEI. For those of you who don't know who they are, they're actually a big powerhouse in the financial advisory realm. They started in 1968. They have over $1 trillion in assets under management or administration. They're a big powerhouse. They're incredible. We're very lucky to have partnered with them. So we have offices in Torrance, Sherman Oaks, and West Los Angeles to help you. Furthermore, we are a fully digital financial firm, meaning we can do business in the comfort of your own living room through methods of the phone, computer, webinars, DocuSign, you name it. We're highly rated on social media, looking at sources like Yelp, Google reviews. I encourage you to go on our social media, check out our YouTube, our Yelp page, and you'll get lots of great free content on our website and YouTube channel. So this presentation is broken down in 4 different sections, the first being retirement basics. When we look at retirement planning as a whole, think of a pyramid. There are 3 sides to that pyramid. The first side is getting the most out of your Social Security. The second is maximizing your income and your income sources. Finally, tax mitigation and strategy. How do we retain as much money as we possibly can? There are 3 questions you need to ask yourself when it comes to retirement planning. The first one is, how are you going to be able to maximize your retirement enjoyment without having to worry about income? Understand there are 3 different phases to retirement. Number 1 is the go-go years. This is when you're going around doing the fun things you've always wanted, pursuing hobbies, playing with the grandkids, getting the most out of your retirement. This is what we refer to when we talk about the golden years. Then we have the slow go years, where things are slowing down in terms of your lifestyle, you're transitioning. The third stage is the no-go years, where you're basically more sedentary, you're maybe spending more time watching TV, writing the great American novel. That third stage of the game is when you're transitioning and just enjoying the final parts of your life cycle. The second stage of the game is trying to figure out how you're going to not outlive your income. That's when it becomes important talking to a professional, someone who's done this time and time again. Someone who can identify consistent income sources so you don't have to worry about sweating the income question. The third question you need to ask yourself is, what are the what ifs? What are the surprises that you have to account for so you don't fall into one of those traps we mentioned before? Next, let's talk about the retiring process. What do you have to do to get ready for retirement in terms of the actual planning? There are a certain number of steps you have to go through when identifying your needs in retirement. Number 1, you want to do a budget. The simple rule of thumb used to be you're going to need 75%, anywhere from 60 to 90% of whatever you need when you're working. So when we talk about the huge range in terms of what retirement looks like to you, that's going to be very important. And based on that simple question, that's going to give me a lot to work with in terms of what we're going to budget and how we're going to budget. Once we put that budget together, then we're going to identify your income sources, and we're going to find out what your needs are. But understand, for everything that disappears over here as an expense, you gain one over here. Over here, the kids might not be in the house and they might not be costing you as much money, but over here, remember, you lose that tax deduction for the kids. So understand there are still surprises that we have to account for, even though you're getting a lower standard of living over here. So you may see the red flag in the upper right-hand corner of these PowerPoints. I want you to be aware of these specifically. These are big landmines that I want you to avoid. So pay extra attention to these slides, as it could be detrimental to your retirement. So once we've done our budget, we want to be able to find out what the income sources are. Then you want to do the deduction. And then we have to explore what that discrepancy is. What is your gap? If you have that gap, we have to figure out how to fill that gap. Now let's talk about the retirement challenges. What are the surprises? What are the what ifs? What are the variables that people don't take into account when they're planning their retirement years? The biggest challenge that people have are medical expenses. Whether you're talking about Medicare or Medigap or just basic overall needs for medical care, these are the biggest what ifs. Medical costs rise roughly at 7 to 9%. So you're looking at huge expenditure just on your medical expenses alone. Now this is a big surprise for people in some cases, but long-term care is not covered by Medicare. If you went to any nursing home across America and looked around, do you think anyone at any point before they arrived there thought they would end up there? Probably not. The fact is, about 2/3 of Americans will need long-term care at some point in their life before they pass. So it's important that you prepare for that. Now the challenge becomes there are only 5 things you can really do when it comes to long-term care. Number 1, do nothing. That's the ostrich strategy. That's essentially the same thing as doing number 2, which is self-insuring. I've never seen a faster way to wipe out a portfolio than not having some kind of long-term care in place. Option 3, you can rely on friends or family and be a burden And I've seen a lot of challenges with that. And I can tell you personally, I am what's called the sandwich generation. I take care of my kids as well as my mother who's in a nursing home. Financially, it's not fun. I'll tell you, I'd rather have that money in my bank account. But the fact is, an average stay in a given year in a nursing home is roughly $82,000. Over a 25-year period, you're looking at roughly $2 million that you're going to need to allocate towards that long-term care. That's why it's crucial we have some form of insurance in place. Now, that leads me to point number 4. Well, some people think, yeah, I'll just get long-term care, and that's a great idea. However, the challenge then becomes when people need it the most. By the time you hit age 80 or 90, they start jacking up rates in some cases, where people can't afford it when they need it, and that becomes its own burden. Then you have option number 5, where you basically can invest in something called asset-based or asset-backed care, where essentially you're getting life insurance with a rider, a long-term care rider attached. So if you need it, great. If you don't need it, you're not throwing those dollars away. So if you want to talk about that, come in, let's have that discussion, or call me over the phone. We can talk about what that means and help you plan for your retirement years. And then there's inflation. Inflation is what we call the silent pneumonia of your portfolio. It eats away at your portfolio by 3 to 4% in a given year. We have to adjust and hedge against inflation. You've probably heard that expression before. I can think back to, for example, stamps. When stamps were 10 cents, now a stamp costs 50 cents. So what we want to do is be able to hedge against inflation so you don't have to worry about rising costs of goods and services. Now let's talk about different challenges to your portfolio investments as a whole. Some of you may be familiar with a gentleman by the name of Rube Goldberg. Rube Goldberg was an engineer cartoonist, and he used to draw these cartoons where it'd show a bowling ball going down a ramp, knocking into a shoe that's tied to a string, knocking into a feather. All these fancy machines that had a lot of activity but very little progress. They didn't actually do anything. That is a great metaphor for some of the portfolios that come across my desk from other firms. Because of things like high fees or the assets contained in the portfolios are not performing. Even though there's a lot going on, you don't see a lot of progress. What we aim to do is minimize fees, try to do a little tax mitigation and make sure the portfolio is working the way it should. Now, there are a lot of challenges that can happen towards a portfolio. It's not just about market risk like we've seen lately with the coronavirus. You have issues like withdrawal rates, order withdrawals. You have RMDs to account for when you get older. And of course, the obvious market risk. All these things come into play when we talk about how you should be retiring and recalibrating as we go into retirement. What worked for you in your 20s to 40s may not necessarily work well when you're 50s and above. What does withdrawal rate really mean? Well, there was a movement that really caught on in the 80s called the rule of 4%, where they said, look, if you can get 3 to 4% out of your portfolio each year, as long as you're hedging against inflation and adjusting, you should be okay for the long term. Okay being a 57% chance of success. Well, there's a company called Morningstar, and Morningstar challenged the rule of 4%. They did a reevaluation, they did some tests, and guess what they found? The rule of 4% is not the rule of 4% anymore. Guess what it is? It's actually closer to 2.8%. Not quite half, but a 40% reduction. So now what people are saying is your 4% is now 2.1% to give yourself a little bit of room for error, which is even more challenging and gives you more of a gap between what you're probably getting in revenue from your assets versus what you're able to live on. 4% was challenging. 2%, that's probably really challenging. So again, now we need to fill that gap with some other assets to take its place. Next, let's talk tax strategy. There are essentially 3 different types of buckets as a strategy that you should be putting your money into to ensure you're going to have enough money in your retirement years. We look at tax strategy as a bucket system. To keep things simple, there are 3 different areas you should be putting your money in. The first bucket is your taxable bucket, meaning your things like your mutual funds, your savings accounts, interest from CDs. Then you have your second bucket. Your second bucket are your tax deferred accounts, your 401ks, your traditional IRAs, and so on. Next, you have your non-taxable bucket, things like your Roths, your LARPs, different instruments where you've already been taxed on your basis, so your interest and dividends are completely tax-free. In an ideal world, you have money coming out of each of those buckets, and you're drawing down different buckets in different sequences to be able to survive through your retirement years. Now understand that you're taking money out for different purposes through your retirement. For example, if you buy a $30,000 Hyundai vehicle in retirement, you would usually use your Roth account for that, because again, you just take out 30 grand, you buy the $30,000 car, case closed. If you buy a $30,000 car using your tax deferred account, you have to take out $50,000 because $20,000 of that is going to be taxable. So again, there's a strategy and a method to the madness that we have to review when you're looking at retirement planning from a tax perspective. Taxes over anything else are the most crucial thing ever, more than rate of return, asset allocation. Taxes are number one. Keeping the money in your pocket is paramount over everything else. So be aware of that fact. We touched on this before, but I want to go over it briefly. The order of withdrawals, where you take the money and what the sequence is in terms of your withdrawals. What I recommend doing, and the rule of thumb, is you take from your taxable accounts first, then you go through your deferred accounts, then you go through your non-taxable accounts. Now here's another thing that people aren't aware of, and that's something called RMDs, required minimum distributions. When you hit age 72, and by the way, it used to be 7.5, they just pushed it back with the Secure Act, at age 72, you have to pay the piper. You have to start taking money out, whether you want to or not, to be able to be taxed on it by the government. So you might have a bump in your tax bracket, in your tax liability, because of these RMDs. Now understand, if you don't take the money out, it is the highest penalty in the IRS code, the highest, 50%, 50, on what you were supposed to take out. The government makes billions of dollars on this, billions of dollars with a B. Don't be caught in this trap. Next, I want to talk about some myths you may have heard along your investment career. And I'm going to just take the top 4 that I think are the most important for the sake of the time we have to work with. The first you probably heard over the course of time is buy and hold. Just buy and hold, leave everything in your 401k, you're going to be fine over time. Well, clearly that's not the case. Look what's happening in people's 401ks now. The assets that may have been good 20, 30 years ago may not be good now. Furthermore, you don't want to be in the same assets when you're first starting your investing career as when you're going into retirement. The way you allocate your assets is going to be different based on when you're in retirement versus when you're starting or in the middle of your prime in your career. Understand on a very high level, and if you leave with nothing else, this is very important to understand. There are 2 very different ways to invest. There's investing for growth and there's investing for income. Growth is what you do in your 20s to your 40s. You're doing a strategy, again, dollar cost averaging, where you go in, where you're just putting your money in and you're just letting it ride for 2 or 3 decades. Income investing is what you do when you're 50s plus. You're making a paradigm shift, going from the G to the I, where you're reallocating assets to go into consistent income generating assets. So you're not gambling like you are in the market when you're younger. Myth number 2, diversification is everything, just diversify, you'll be fine. Well, I quote Warren Buffett, who, if you didn't know, is one of the most successful investors of our lifetime, where he says, too much diversification is chaos. So he recommends going anywhere from about 10 assets, 15 assets or so. There's only so much research one person can do on their assets to really be fully informed and maintain the information needed to watch those assets. So don't go too crazy and diversify any more than you need to. Myth number 3, without risk, there's no reward. How many times have we heard that? Well, the truth is there's been an evolution in investing. And you don't have to invest the same way we've been investing the last 200 years, like your grandfather or your father. You want to talk about different options, you can still get a good return and still take less risk. Another big myth I want to demystify is when you talk to a guy on Wall Street, what are they going to tell you you're going to average in the market over time? Usually they'll say you're going to average 10% return. And I'd say as an average, that's probably accurate. So when we look at the truth, we didn't come anywhere near to a 10% return over the last 2 decades. If we give you an overall average over time, because of the 2 major market dips in 2002 and 2008, it's closer to around 5%. I challenge even that, and now that we've had a huge decline, if you're incorporating what's happened recently, I'm guessing it's probably closer to 4%. So again, be careful when someone tells you the average of 10%. That's actually not accurate. So let's talk about some of the more stable assets that we can explore. And again, another reason to contact us in the office. This is a very, very important slide, and I want to show you apples to apples, 2 different types of strategies when investing in the market and why you want to invest this way. We have what's called a growth portfolio on the left and an income strategy portfolio on the right. In both cases, you start with $1 million in the beginning. In both cases, you are taking out $40,000 in both scenarios each year. This is benchmarked to the years 2000 to 2018. And as you can see, we've only had 5 down years. The rest, 13 good years of prosperity. So when we look at the overall time frame in a growth strategy, again, starting with $1 million, over the course of an 18-year period, at the end, you have just over $300,000 left in your portfolio. Conversely, with an income strategy, because you're drawing on the interest and the dividends, you're not dipping into your principal, because you're living on the eggs, so to speak, not cannibalizing the chicken. You're able to sustain and keep the cost basis there, the principal, and not have to have that money dwindle down. I'm a simple guy, I like to keep it simple. If you don't have to eat through your money, why would you? In looking at a good metaphor to represent this, a growth portfolio can be seen like, as cheesy as a sound, no pun intended, a pizza. People think your nest egg is supposed to be a big pizza, and you're supposed to take a slice, a slice, a slice, until what happens? Boom, it's all gone. That's a growth portfolio strategy. We call that reverse DCA, reverse dollar cost averaging, because it's the exact opposite when you're younger, when you're putting money in versus now you're taking the money out. Conversely, we have the income portfolio, wherein you're using, as comical as it sounds, it's like in the metaphor of a chicken farmer. With that chicken farmer, you only have 1 chicken coop with 1 chicken to rest you the rest of your life. Do you want to cannibalize the chicken, or do you want to eat the eggs? You want to eat the eggs, because that way the chicken keeps laying those eggs, so you always have the interest and dividends to survive on. All I'm saying is there's a more intelligent way to invest. We can talk about that way if you decide to contact us. Is a Roth conversion right for you? This is one of the bigger questions I get asked when people come in to see me. And the truth is, it just depends. There are both pros and cons for doing a Roth conversion. For those of you who aren't aware, don't know what a Roth conversion is, a Roth conversion is taking what's called a deferred qualified account and putting it into a Roth, moving over to a Roth account where the interest and dividends are tax-free. Understand when you go from a 401k over here or a traditional IRA into a Roth, that does become a taxable event. So again, there's no perfect solution. But again, if you do it right, there are ways you can do it where it may make sense. It may make more sense for you. So understand that whether you make that Roth conversion, there's a lot of factors that go into that. If you're someone who's worried about taxes and taxes going up later on, then it may make sense for you. Because understand right now, we're in some of the lowest tax rates in the history of America. So if you think that tax rates will go up, and I'm one of those people that certainly do, it may be advantageous for you to make that Roth conversion. Conversely, if you don't want to get hit, if you're in some of the highest earning years where you're making a lot of money, maybe you want to hold off. Whether a Roth conversion is right for you or not, we can talk about the pros and cons if you decide to come in and talk to me. So I'd just like to stop and talk to you about some more reasons why you may want to come in and talk to me, or pick up the phone, or we have a webinar where we go over your portfolio. First of all, My goal is not to beat you overhead to become a client. You'll have to ask me. There's no charge for an initial consultation. You're going to come in. I have no formal agenda. Either you come into the office or we talk over the phone or we go through the computer. We can go through a webinar. I can look at your statements. We can talk about Social Security, RMDs, Medicare, anything financial related we can pretty much help you with. We want to talk about some of the challenges that other people have had with their retirement. We're going to talk about possible pitfalls, benefits, strategies, a lot of reasons to come in and talk to me. So again, it starts with you picking up the phone or the keyboard, and I want you to go ahead and reach out. We'd love to help you. Is it possible to save people a considerable amount of money with a simple conversation? Absolutely. Even looking at Social Security, we've given people the opportunity where we've helped them make a tremendous amount of money in their Social Security earnings just by giving them information. My mother once had a saying, she used to tell us all the time, use the time to your advantage. Most of us are stuck on a lockdown or in quarantine or scared about going out because we don't catch the coronavirus. Use that time to your advantage, just like Mom said. We want to make sure you have the opportunity to contact us. Life, the hustle and bustle of life gets in the way of progress and productivity. This is an excellent time when, rather than watching television, you can take time out of life, address what needs to be addressed, and we can focus on your financial plan. Here we are on the home stretch. We just have a few more minutes left. We're going to talk about strategizing for a volatile market. So where are we now? Well, currently we're dealing knee-deep with this virus. We've just had an onset. We've gone from not taking it very seriously in the beginning to full force. We're on DEFCON 1 when it comes to the virus. The city of Los Angeles, where I'm located, is currently on lockdown. So people, even though I see them scurrying about, they're not supposed to be out of their homes. Well, right now we have just under 300,000 people worldwide that have been affected. There have been just under 12,000 deaths worldwide. When we compare this to the bigger overall population, there's 7.8 billion people on the planet. And when we look back as a reference point to the Spanish flu, we have 500 million people were infected. So relatively speaking, while I think a considerable amount more people will be infected, we do have more information, better communication channels in terms of avoiding that flu, and that's a great thing. People right now are experiencing mass layoffs across the country, and what I'm seeing again is the opportunity where people have a lot more time on their hands than they were expecting. So the biggest question I'm getting asked right now by some of my clients I'd like to share with you right now are, what should I be doing in terms of reallocating, throwing money in the market, pulling money out of the market? What do I need to be doing? And if you want to discuss this as you come in and see us or contact us, we can go over these different strategies as it pertains to you. Well, our first strategy is called buy and hold. We talked about this briefly before. For those of you who are younger being defined as age 18 to 45, 50, we're doing a strategy called DCA, dollar cost averaging, in your portfolio. Keep on doing that. Don't look back. When the statements come, just don't open them. Put them to the side. Strategy 2, investing with emergency breaks. For those seniors that still wanted to go aggressive, and again, this is kind of a hindsight thing, but we're still at a point where it may drop more. So based on how you think the market's going to go, for those of you that went aggressive before and now want to play defense, we could put you in a situation where you automatically drop out and go to treasuries after a 20% drop. Knowing that we're at 32% now, we could still do that, but you may be taking something of a loss, more so than if we had this conversation 3 weeks ago. Some people still want to do that. It is hard to get back up because you have less time to work with if you are a senior. I don't recommend necessarily going and doing this when you're younger, but as a senior, you want to mitigate risk and loss. Strategy number 3, you can talk about going from the G to the I, going from the growth or accumulation strategy, going to the income or the distribution strategy. If you're in the later part of your life, it's something worth exploring. Even if you want to transition, you can go back and forth between these strategies. So if you're even in your 40s or 50s, you're nervous about the volatility, come talk to me. We can still talk about making that transition. what strategy someone needs to be in is completely based on a variety of different factors, including things like risk tolerance, age, family longevity, and so on. Strategy number 4, the drawdown strategy. So how you take the money out is going to come into play now that we're in a beat down market. I don't want to go too much into this because this is after the fact. You want to start taking from different sources for different reasons. We touched on this briefly before. If that's your focus, come talk to me and we can have that discussion. Number 5, bulletproofing the portfolio. It is still not too late to go into a different stance where you can invest in the market with no downside risk. Whether you want to go all out and go into something like treasuries and not have to worry about any volatility, or whether you want to go through a medium and insurance product and still invest in the market, we can do that. Those strategies are beyond the scope of today's conversation, but we can talk about that and show you how else we can invest with minimal risk, if at all. Doubling down. I get a lot of inquiries about this right now. When do I throw money into the market? I don't have a concrete answer. I can only give you my personal opinion, and my personal opinion is we have not seen the worst of it. I think that things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. The market has to cycle itself, and while yes, the market is way ahead of what's happening in real time, the fact is we still have to have people get sick. We still have to have people deal with the repercussions. We have to have the layoffs happen. We have to have the virus take its course. If we do have that second major event, which God willing, I hope we don't, that has to happen as well. Now understand, while you're never going to catch the top 5 to 10% of the market, you'll never catch the bottom 5 to 10% of the market. We can get close to high or low. So knowing that's the case, I would not be in a rush to put the money into play right now. I think we still have some time, but this is a very, very different scenario. First of all, uncharted territory, completely uncharted. We've never dealt with anything like this before within our time frame, our lifetime. So again, I think even though we're going to be experiencing for sure a lot of volatility, both swings, whiplash even, up and down, I still think we have a lot of time left before we see things get close to a bottoming out. So while I definitely think it's great to have money sitting in cash, anything you have in reservoir, have that cash discrepancy fund. That's how the rich get richer. They have a huge stack of cash waiting to put that money into play. I don't know your particular situation and where you should go from here is one of many reasons you should come contact us. Finally, we have our 7th strategy where people are taking their assets or have taken their assets and gone from the stock market as a whole and gone into more conservative assets as they consider. Things like gold, more cyclical stocks maybe. Cyclical stocks being defined as things like investing in things like Coke, fast food restaurants, things that people still need in a recession. So that's one option. Gold is another option, but now it's going to spike just like it spiked in 2008. It spiked during stagflation in the 70s. Gold is a good way to go for the temporary. I think, yeah, in the next couple of years, it's a good way it's going to go up. But again, long term, no. Also doing option trading, doing things like puts, where if you didn't know, option trading is basically it's a derivative. So you have the main tool, which is the stock. Then you're basically getting the opportunity to buy that stock at a later time. There are different, more advanced strategies we can explore if you're interested, but again, I don't even recommend those because no one knows. So again, a lot of things we can do here. It all depends. This is just a theory. If you want to learn about the practice, then contact us. I want everyone to understand that I am not trying to be a doomsday man here. I'm not preaching doom and gloom for the sake of being a negative Nelly. I do think that this is just one small speed bump over a long period of time. If we look back in our history of the United States, we've had a huge amount of issues, significantly worse than this. We've gotten through all of them unscathed. Whether you're talking about the Great Depression, World Wars, understand this is temporary. I just want to have people be prepared. I'm not trying to be negative for negativity's sake. We're going to get through this. You're going to be unscathed. Be patient. We'll be through it, I'm guessing, within a year or two. But be patient and prepare for the worst and hope for the best. I hope this has been of tremendous value for the people that have watched it. I encourage you to forward this information, the link or whatnot, to your friends, your family, people that can benefit from this too. The biggest challenge you guys have as investors is you don't know what you don't know. What I wanted to be able to do is inform you. Everything we talked about today is just the tip of the iceberg. So if you want to reach out, let's talk about how we can apply this textbook information to your particular situation. We genuinely love helping people. People ask, how are you different than other firms? That's how. We love helping. I get up in the morning excited to go to work because I know I'm saving financial lives. I want to save and help yours as well. Reach out. I look forward to helping you. Be safe. I wish you all the best.